but we're going to roughly organize this by team. I think that's the simplest way to do it, especially since some of the teams that have been active have made multiple moves. So let's start with the Phillies of Philadelphia. Jake, they lost the series this weekend against Cleveland at home, but they were busy. Dave Dombrowski, what a surprise. Dave Dombrowski, in charge of the front office of the best team in baseball, is making some aggressive moves. So that part is not shocking whatsoever. However, the two trades that they did make are some interesting maneuvers.
They don't call him Dealer Dave because he works at the casino down the street from Citizens Bank Park, Jordan. This is a man who loves action and transacting, okay? And Mr. Dombrowski did the ultimate challenge trade, acquiring Austin Hayes from the Baltimore Orioles for Sir Anthony Dominguez, a hard-throwing reliever, and outfielder Christian Pache. Now, just a little bit of background. I was on my way to have lunch with my wonderful fiance and her family when this trade came out. And I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to have to write about this one because it's the Orioles and the Phillies. And so I did that. And here are my thoughts on this trade. Big picture. Two contenders swapping players on their big league rosters is fascinating. I love it because I don't need to understand how good this high A third baseman is to properly evaluate the trade. I have spent a lot of time watching Austin Hayes, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and Christian Pache do the baseball. And so instead of having to just like cram a bunch of numbers from Fangraphs on a prospect, I can like think about this in reality. This is what trades should be. This is what they were back in my day. Okay. No dorky prospect evaluation from Jordan Shusterman on this one. Pretty simple though. Austin Hayes is going to the Phillies because he's going to give them a right-handed bat that can play the outfield. They've had Brandon Marsh playing left and Johan Rojas playing center. What they're going to do with Hayes is have him platoon with Marsh, who has really struggled to hit left-handed pitching. Hayes hits left-handed pitching really well, even better on the road because when he's at home at Baltimore, they have the enormous wall in left field. And so that's kind of cooled his numbers down since they moved the wall back. And so for the Phillies, it makes a whole lot of sense. And then for the Orioles, it's really a better roster fit, even though Hayes was there for such a long time. Like Pache is a right-handed hitting guy who can play center field. Hayes really couldn't play center field anymore. They've had Mullins and Colton Cowser playing center, both of whom are left-handed. So they just needed another right-handed outfield bat. I still think they might go get another one and not keep Pache. That's a possibility. But if they don't do that, Pache still fits well with their roster. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for Hayes too, I think the ballpark fit there is definitely nice. I mean, you mentioned two contenders making a deal with major leaguers. It's not just two contenders. I mean, these have been kind of consensus the two best teams in the league for the last month, like in each league for the last, month or two or so. And so now it's easy. It's not just like automatic, book your tickets for the Phillies Orioles World Series. It's not
We're
that
all
simple.
staying at an Airbnb in Aberdeen, baby.
Right. We can all hang out at the Ripken Experience Hotel or whatever. But no, I mean, it's not just that, right? I mean, these are the two teams. And so it is interesting that now we're going to get to the other big move that the Orioles make, which I think is that both of these teams made, right? Because this one is nice and easy to think about for the reasons you explained, but they did ultimately both also deal from some prospect depth here in a second, which we'll talk about. But as for the Phillies, because as it relates to their other move, and this is why it's interesting for both these teams, there's not that many holes on these rosters, right? And so there's going to be very specific moves. And so as we open it up to the other move that the Phillies made.
Well, just quickly, when it became clear that Whit Merrifield was cooked like a turducken, the number one thing on Dave Dombrowski's to-do list was right-handed hitting outfielder. Everyone knew that. I knew that. You knew that. Everybody I'd ever met in my life knew that. What was interesting is that they went and got a guy from a contending team. I think that was surprising. In my head, I had already penciled Mark Canha on the Phillies roster. And so for it to be Austin Hayes, a player who was coming from the first place Orioles, is super interesting. But let's pivot now to what the Phillies did today, acquiring Carlos Estevez from the Angels for George Clausen and Samuel Aldegari, two minor league pitchers. Let's start with Estevez, please.
Yeah, well, again, because this is related at least in part, to being willing to deal away from someone who has been a part of your major league bullpen in a very real way over the last couple of years, which is, Sir Anthony Dominguez, who is still under contract for, I believe, at least another year or two, whereas Estevez is a straight rental. Now, Estevez is an interesting closer. He's someone who relies so much on just like this very, very, very good fastball to where it's just like, here it is and hit it. And generally, guys haven't really been hitting it, but it's also why the strikeout rate isn't necessarily through the roof. But he throws a ton of strikes, or at least he does now. This version of him throws a ton of strikes. It has, left him liable for the occasional, brutal home run. But the fastball's just been so good, and he's thrown so many strikes that, especially the Phillies bullpen knows this as well as anyone. The stuff has been unquestionable, but the strike throwing hasn't always been there for even their best guys. And so to get Estevez, that's not something you're going to have to worry about.
Right.
And I have to imagine that that's part of what really, had him be extra appealing, and that they paid a real price here for a guy for just a couple of months.
The Phillies clearly believe that you need 5 good relievers to get through October, right? Strahm and Hoffman were all-stars. Orion Kerkering has been very good. Jose Alvarado has been shaky this year, but the Phillies definitely believe they can get him right for the postseason. And so then Estevez is the 5th piece that they want. Dominguez had been that piece in the past. He looked out of rhythm a lot of the season, so it doesn't surprise me that they went kind of swap those two guys out. Jordan Shusterman.
Yes.
You now get 1 sentence on these prospects, please.
1 sentence each?
Sure, man.
Samuel Aldegheri is a left-handed Italian pitcher. Not his name sounds Italian. No. Born in Italy, Italian person. Okay.
Not bada bing. More like,
no.
This is not Italian American. Like we're talking.
No. This is a real, and again, we've seen a handful of actual European prospects kind of pop up in recent years. Right. He is that, and he's had a very good starts of his pro career.
He makes his pesto with a mortar and pestle. He's not throwing that in a blender. Okay.
Yes. So Samuel Aldegheri, that is a real prospect. Now, again, younger, but interesting, long way. I mean, he's 22 already, so it's not like he's a teenager, but interesting stuff. Clausen.
It's going to be tough. Yeah. It's going to be tough for his Nona to be, another 3 hours time difference away.
Time zone wise, that is a tough bounce, I would imagine, for the Aldegheri family. But anyway, he's not, again, velo, whatever. Okay, George Clausen. George Clausen deserves his own podcast. This dude could not get on the mound at the University of Minnesota because his strike throwing was so bad. And Minnesota's not even good. And that's how reckless his command was. And the Phillies were like, whatever. The dude throws 100 and we know how to teach pitching. So they drafted him, and miraculously, basically immediately, not only were they like, you can be a starter, you can also now magically throw strikes. He was one of the best pitchers in minor league baseball for the first 2 months. He's kind of tailed off recently. I'm not sure if there's been some injury stuff there, but upside wise, I mean, he has maybe top 10 stuff in the minor leagues. And so that is a huge, developmental ball of clay for the Angels' desolate farm system to work with. What happens next with him, I don't know, but it is certainly an exciting arm at the very, very, very least that, good for the Angels to get for 2 months of Carlos Estevez.
Yeah, it is a nice little haul for them. Good job. Good job, Angels. Let's talk about another big trade that went down. The Baltimore Orioles acquiring Zach Eflin from the Tampa Bay Rays for a trio of prospects: Jackson Baumeister, Mac Horvath, and Matthew Etzel.